for joining. I know people are coming in the masses right now. So our Derby City Agile meetup, we pivoted to virtual 2 years ago and haven't stopped. So we've really loved the national and global growth of this community that started off with just, the Louisville IT and business world. We now have, connections everywhere. So it's been awesome to see. One day we'll have another one in person. I know me and Anna have talked about it, but thank you for everyone that's joining. If you don't know myself, I'm Jay Brown. I work with a IT services company. We're based out of the Ohio Valley, as well as offshore. We help enterprise companies with digital transformation at a very high level. I'm one of the organizers, along with Anna Kepshire, who I will hand it over to introduce Woody. If you have any questions during this, we're going to save a little bit of time at the end of the presentation. I'll curate those if you can put them in chat, and then we'll sort of do a one-on-one towards the end. So thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to hand it over to Anna.
Hi, everyone. Happy 2022. And when Jay mentioned we have people from all over, we have people from literally all over, not just the country, but all over the world. I know we've had several people from Portugal sign up, which is awesome. And I'm very fortunate. I work with Chet Hendrickson and Damon Poole, and Chet has been talking about Woody every single class. He brings Woody up. So I finally reached out to Woody and I asked him if he would be so kind to present, and he jumped on board. But first, I'm Anna Kepshire. For those who don't know me, I own KEP Training, and I run classes with both the Scrum Alliance and IC Agile. And I can, put those in the chat for later. But without further ado, Woody is really he is like a legend. He is like there at the beginning of mob programming. Like he helped create it. And he is the founder of No Estimates. I mean, this is a legend. So without further ado, Woody, we are so excited to have you. And thank you for kicking us off in 2022, our first one.
Well, thank you. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I want to share some stuff that's been important to me, and that I have the opportunity to do that is really an honor. So thank you so much. Those of you who don't know about mob programming, I'll do a quick introduction. I think I can get through this whole talk in about 45 minutes, which will only leave a little bit of time in fact, I think I'll set a timer of 45 minutes to tell me that I better stop. Okay, so yeah, mob programming is just a very simple concept. So I'll do a quick intro to it right here, and then we'll move on to what I want to talk about today, which is why I think it's so useful. So first of all, I have to always start with this quote from Peter Block. I don't really think I can tell anybody what they should do or whether or not they should try something. I would like to encourage everyone to learn about and try mob programming, but I can't know your own situations and so on and what would really work for you. So I'm really just sharing my own experiences and what we've learned along the way. And this particular talk is about why we think mob programming is useful, or why we think it works. We won't do this exercise. Joshua Karievsky, who wrote the book Refactoring to Patterns, I worked with him for about 6 months. He's well known in the Agile world. He owns Industrial Logic. He said, Woody, you should put a picture of a cat into your slides because it make you come across a little more human. So I picked the least human kind of picture of a cat because I think he meant you should have a furry, cuddly looking cat. But I like this picture because it kind of tells us that whatever we put in front of ourselves, we can imprint on it whatever pattern we want to. So if somebody's looking at something like that, this is not the only way a map could be shown. But when you see the map this way, they thought, hey, that could be an outline of a cat. So that's just a warning about what I just said. I'm just sharing stuff from my own point of view. I can't say anything that I'm going to share with you is a truth, but I do try to tell the true story of things, like how things actually happened. I'll share a little bit of that. All this started for me. You know what? I got to make sure that I'm doing the right slides. Because I have the same start in two different slides. This one would give us a longer introduction to mob programming. So I want to stop that and get one that has, yeah, I'm going to stop that one. And I'm going to do this one that has a much shorter introduction. I have different versions for different length talks. So I'm already sharing the screen. Okay. Sorry for that I need to restart that, but it's the same material for the very beginning. I just need to get it running. You know, I have two screens and 6 things open. Just makes it super difficult for me to do things. All righty.
I have always found that if I stop sharing, everything goes smoother.
Yeah, that's a good point. The sharing does interfere just a bit, doesn't it? There, I was looking up Louisville earlier. I came right through here. I played at a bluegrass festival near Lexington, and I spent about a week in Berea when I was about 21 years old. So I love Kentucky. I must say, I built a log cabin down here near Norton, Virginia, in a place called Marbone Creek. And so didn't get done with it. I built part of it. Yeah, that was hard work. Don't ever start something you're not going to finish, but that seems to be the story of my life. Okay, let's go back to this. So this is a really rapid introduction. I didn't want to do the long introduction version. Mob programming is all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, and at the same computer. This is essentially what Agile is. I think the people who originally coined the term Agile for software development and all the folks that were kind of involved in thinking about this in the late 90s, early 2000, they understood that what was wrong a lot in the way software development was being done was that we didn't really collaborate much. We were breaking the work apart into different teams, but even different departments. We had a database department, a testing department, so on and so on. So everything would be broken out. If you understand Conway's law, which basically says that the system within which you are creating the software will be imprinted on the software itself. That means you're going to get a pretty lousy architecture just because of the way your organization is organized or structured. Realizing that collaboration wasn't happening as well or as often as it could or in the best ways, they understood that if we worked on the same thing at the same time and in the same space, we could collaborate. Well, mob programming just emphasizes that by taking it just an inch further and saying, why don't we just work all together in the actual creation of the code? So really anything that we do as a team within the work of this team is done as a group. It might be the product owner work, the testing work, the coding work, all of the work. So can we, turn it up that far? And we actually found we were able to. The concept again is this: we're going to gather together all the skills and knowledge we need so we can work directly from start to finish on anything we do without being interrupted, without having to go off the team to ask for help. So we could really, truly get a one-piece flow in lean terms. So this was, what happened for us. But why this happened is what I'm going to cover, or why this works is what I'm going to cover today. Kind of looks like this. Here we've got a tester. We've got a product owner who's also happens to be a coder on a different team. Another developer, database expert, developer. If you think of the developers as people who know how to write code and but have a lot of other skills as well, that's pretty much a full cross-functional team. Where if the product owner is on the team, we get big advantages. We'll learn about that later. It's not 5 people watching one person coding, but we need some kind of techniques and I would say practices to make this work well. And we use this thing we call driver navigators. You can think of it, there's other ways to describe it, but essentially there's somebody at the keyboard. They're acting as the driver. They're not in charge. The team is in charge. The navigators are guiding the process. So if we make this kind of clear, if you get into a taxi or an Uber or whatever, the driver is not in charge of where you're going. The driver knows how to get places. And you might just say, I got to go to Mary's house. I don't know the address, but I can guide you there. You could think of it being kind of that way. So instead of telling the Uber driver exactly where you're going, or a taxi driver, you would guide them. You would say, go 2 miles down this road and make a left turn. Now go 2 miles down that and we're going to make a right turn. Then go to where the bridge burnt out, then make a left turn, and so on and so on. And, that's how you get there. That's sort of the same thing. So without going into too much detail, we follow this guideline. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. Interestingly, this, while it seems like it's counter to the way we would normally work, let's say pair programming, where if you get an idea, you sit to the computer, you start typing. This requires that we communicate with each other and share our ideas out loud and at the whiteboard. We have to learn a lot of stuff, like how to listen for each other's intent, be able to explain ourselves well, be able to try other people's ideas, be willing to not insist on doing things your own way. There's a lot of skills to be able to do this well, but it does seem crazy. I like this definition. I got it out of off the internet. Preposterous means contrary to reason or common sense, utterly absurd or ridiculous. I like both of those definitions. My father, who was an engineer, used to say, I don't care about common sense. I care about unconventional wisdom. We're trying to solve problems here. His engineering was in electronics for the phone company. We're trying to solve problems here that we don't yet have the answer. So common sense doesn't not even a chance for it to exist yet. And Einstein, which I never met him, but I sure would have liked to, is credited with saying, if an idea isn't at first absurd, it's probably not a good idea. I like that. So this does seem crazy. I'll agree with that. If somebody came to me 40 years ago and said, hey, this is how you should work, I would have thought that's crazy. In the meantime, I learned never say that. If somebody tells you some really crazy way of working, and there's somebody you at least respect a little bit, just assume they're right, because they're going to prove you're wrong in a few minutes if you say that can't possibly work, because they're not sharing it because it can't work. So this has been done all over the world. Where we first started, you saw that first picture. This is what it was like just before the pandemic. They've now gotten rid of this space and they're all working remotely. But you'll see we got big monitors. We've got 6 workstation areas in here, lots of stuff going on here. Won't go into details. And here's pictures of people doing it all over the world. Pay attention to 2 things. People will often ask, how do you keep everyone engaged? And all of these people, the people are engaged, all these pictures. I've never had a trouble with that, because we're all working pretty rapidly on something that's important and interesting to all of us. But also look at the different layouts. You can set this up many different ways, including remotely. The last 2 years, I've been only working remotely. I got back from Europe on March 1st of 2020, and basically have only done one, on-site training since then. That's probably not going to happen for me for a while. But look at all these folks. I'll just say real quick here. The one in Boston, they have at least 6 or 7 teams working this way when I took that picture. The one in GDS London, they had about the same number of people. Stockholm at TUI, they had 8 teams. I visited them. They've been doing it already for a year or more. Unruly in London, they heard me give a talk at a conference, and within a week or 2, they had 6 teams working this way. At the bottom, Zito, their boss had come to a workshop, came back and shared it with his teams. They had 6 teams working this way pretty quickly. And last time I talked to them, they had 10 teams working this way, on and on. Oh, that one picture there, that of course is not mob programming, but because I was not doing consulting when I was 6 years old. So they had to wait a while, right? So, but look at all these other places everywhere. This last one here is in Sweden. They have at least 10 teams working this way. I've done workshops for them. But this is beautiful, because this is from an article was written by this person here, Leah Kovac-Beckman, and she is a UX designer, and she works full-time with the mob programming team. This is really, truly cross-functional. I think it's a powerful picture. It can be done remotely. It works very well remotely. It's similar to this. These people are not doing software development. What they're doing is a space mission, but they've gathered all the brilliant minds. They need to do this mission, and they're all working the same time at the same place on the same thing. Now there are people spread across the world, but it's the basic same idea. So why would we work this way? I usually do as an exercise, but in the interest of time today, I'm going to rush through this and just tell you what I normally get. If I ask this question, people normally say things like this. Well, you can learn a lot. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing. You get this value of the continuous code and design review. Lots of perspectives on the work. If we have lots of perspectives and we try the things and we get rapid feedback, we're going to focus on the right things. When we work separately and alone and we're assigned our work, we don't get to decide what's important. When we work this way closely, collaboratively, we discover the right things. And this enhances the flow of the work, which is what this talk is about. I'll cover that as we go. It eliminates queues, reduces inventory. This leads to better solutions, higher quality. And in the meantime, it's a lot of fun. It's very engaging. My goal when I came to work at the place where we created this way of working, my goal was to make it where every day when all my teams come in, all the people come in, they're really happy that this happens to be the place they're working. As opposed to, I just got to pay my bills, so I'm working. That they're happy that if they got to work, this is where we're working. And we found this to be really engaging, less stressful, more fun. My wife used to tell me, boy, when you come home from work, you're happy. It used to be you were really mad, and so it changed my overall attitude of life. I think it's really.
Woody, that's one of the things I noticed in all the photos. Everybody looked really happy.
Yes, and in our video that we shared, we pointed that out because everyone who would come to visit us, we used to offer people to come visit. They would say, "Boy, people seem to be enjoying working here." That was like, that's a difference from where I work. That's a sad commentary on the world. So why would we work this way? I'm going to answer this from the point of view of a manager. Why would you work this way? Because the team had the freedom to decide how they were going to work. Managers often block this. They block these kinds of ideas. So managers, pay attention to this. I have a bigger talk on that. We'll do some other day. So when I share about mob programming, because that was the quick introduction, now let's see if we can do the quick explanation of what we're doing here. People will always ask this question. Somebody will ask it. So I realized I need to learn how to answer it. Because the very first time this was asked, 2012, at the very first talk I gave on mob programming, we'd only been mob programming about 8-9 months, maybe almost 10 months. Somebody asked this question. How can you be productive with 5 people at one computer? And I answered it exactly like this. I don't know. It's the blind leading the blind. I don't know why this works. I don't know how this works. I just know that it works. So does it matter how it works? I'm just sharing with you some experience. You can go take this experience I'm sharing and experiment with it yourself. But we were paying a lot of attention. My job as a facilitator, as a coach, as a manager, but even as a programmer, because I spent much of my programming career just programming for other people in their, on other teams. But I feel my job is to pay attention. If you pay attention, you get to see what's working, what's not working. And this is what we noticed. When we worked separately and added that work up together, before we'd started mob programming, and really for the years before I worked at this place, we would get a certain amount of work done. But once we started mob programming, we were getting a lot more work done. And our figures showed us it was approximately, don't quote me on this, but it is in the recording here, it was about 5 to 10 times as much stuff getting done. But getting done isn't very important to me. At first, people want to know, how can you be productive? And I realized I don't like that word productive. Because here's the difference. This really represents 2 actual days of work from our records of working, doing solo work where we gather the work together at the end, or mob programming. This just represents 2 days of work from our records. But it wasn't just more stuff. It was the more meaningful stuff. It's the stuff the users really wanted. It was the stuff that really gave us the value. And it was better done. It was more in the way, the qualities included, the users really liked using the stuff we were writing. It wasn't just doing what they wanted. It was a pleasure to use. It was easier to work on. It was easier to enhance. It was easier to deploy. All the things that we want, we were getting that, and we were getting the higher quality as far as bug count goes. Because this is hard to believe, but in the 3.5 years I worked at Hunter, after we started working this way, we only had 3 bugs reported into our bug tracking system. We no longer needed a bug tracking system, except for the work that was done in the years leading up to this. That's super high quality. Matter of fact, for 1.5 years, we didn't get a single bug. We got 1 bug in that first 1.5 years. Our quality had gone through the roof. And why is this? Well, hopefully that's obvious to you. Because we have testers involved, because we're scrutinizing our work as we go, that the product owner is involved. All of that really led to this higher quality. So we knew it has something to do with this saying from Russell Acuff, but exactly how it related, that's what I'm going to try and share. A system is not the sum of the behavior of the parts. It's the products of their interactions. And if you think about this enough, it becomes very powerful. So we knew this was what was going on. It was, we were interacting really well and going directly from start to finish. But how was this working for us? So I didn't like the question, and I'm going to take you through the process that I used, that I learned from my father, who I said was an engineer for the phone company. He used to say this: a good question isn't for answers, it's for finding a better question. So whatever question is first asked, he would say, is usually the wrong question. They're trying to trap you. They're looking for ways to say, no, we can't do what it is you think we need to do. So his job was to convince cities to put in a new switching station, or part of his job was to design the switching stations. He was involved in all levels of this stuff. He was an electronics engineer or an electrical and electronics engineer, but he also was in charge of finding and placing switching stations and stuff like that. So he had a lot of experience and was trained in these things. So I think some of this he may have learned from someone else. I wanted the better question my father would have told me you need. And this is what I found. I didn't like, so he would say this: you first have to rephrase their question into a question you're willing to answer. And I didn't like this question because I didn't like the word productivity. So how can we be productive with 5 people at one computer? I'm going to share about these 3 ideas. Efficiency is about utilization. How well are we using this stuff? If we have a factory, we have this machine, is it running full speed? Is it running all the time? Does it have as little downtime as possible? That's utilization. Productivity is you've produced something, we've completed something. But to me, effectiveness combines efficiency and productivity. We're getting the right things done. I'm much more interested in effectiveness. You can measure efficiency by just measuring, is everybody busy? Is the machine running full speed? Is that person heads down cranking out code every day? Whatever it is you want to measure by. You can measure productivity by how much did we get done? But who cares what you got done if nobody's using it? I've worked on projects that even as long as 2- and 3-year projects that ended up nobody ever used. They didn't like it. It didn't work. Effectiveness is about working on the right things. My father again used to say, I'd rather work slowly on the right thing than quickly on the wrong thing. Sometimes we got to work on the wrong thing to discover the right thing, but you get the idea, I hope. So how can we be productive? I want to just change that. How can we be effective? Now, this isn't the better question. This is the technique we go through to get to the better question. So I still wanted that better question. By the way, that is a real picture of my father at about 20 years before I met him, because I was born when he was 25. So I think he's about 5 years old here. You know, dang, every time I look at that picture, I wish I could be talking with my dad right now, because I did talk with him after mob programming started, and I still have questions I want to ask him, because he worked in a highly collaborative manner. Someday, if we have a chance, we can have a chat about that. He was an extremely good role model for me. But he would then say this: now that you understand the question and you phrase it in a way that makes more sense, you need to understand the point of view of the person asking the question. So if you don't ever get that point of view, you're not going to ever give the right answer. And really, we still want that better question. So I would ask after the workshop or whatever, I'd ask, well, why did you want to ask that question about the productivity? What is it that you believe about this? And he said, well, I know when I separate the people and we're working on a bunch of different things, we're getting a lot of work done. And so they already believe they're getting a lot of work done. And they will phrase it sometimes this way: I don't want to just get 5 things done. I mean, I want to get 5 things done, not just one thing. I think that's a misunderstanding of what we're doing here. We're still going to get 5 things done. We're just going to get them done one at a time. And with everybody on it, we're going to get it done pretty dang fast. So it's, in this case, I would even say, when people say, I want to get 5 things done, what they're really implying, or I think what's hidden in there, is I want to get 5 things being worked on, not necessarily being done. They think it's about getting them done, but what you've done is you've divided your troops. You ever heard that divide and conquer? That doesn't mean take all your troops and divide them up It means divide the enemy, right? It's not dividing your team. So yeah, they'll also say it this way. I don't want to pay 5 people to do the work of 1. It's another way of saying the same thing. We're not paying 5 people to get the work of 1. We're paying 5 people to get the work of 5, just in a more effective manner. At least that's the way I would argue it. Yeah. So now my father would say, we need to flip this over. I love this picture. It's a self-portrait. My wife is the artist who does all these pictures, and she writes children's books and illustrates them. And she says this is a self-portrait of her when she was a little girl, because she loved to play with cats. But she said, I don't think the cats love to play with me. So she would, carry them around like this. I think that's a cute picture. But let's flip it over. So my father would say, once you understand the point of view that they're presenting, phrase it in the point of view that you're presenting, the opposite, because it's an opposite point of view. And this is how I would say it. How can we be effective if we separate the people that should be working together? Now, neither of these are a better question. They're both not the right question, but it's leading us to the better question. When we separate people, we often put them in different cubicles. Or of course, nowadays we're all working from home. We would not have them working in a Zoom meeting together. They would all just be separately working, reading their emails, doing their work. But there's bigger separations that are even worse. We put them in different buildings, or an even worse one, we put them in different departments. When they're in different departments, it really indicates we have to communicate manager to manager to get people worker to worker to communicate. It really becomes a mess. We have to be very careful about this stuff. So that separation, what value is there in the separation? And most people who will separate in the workplace, which is what's been going on for the last 40 years, they believe this is effective. They have beliefs that this is effective. I don't think it is. I think we need to learn something different. But this led to a better question. And actually it took 2 steps. The step to the one I just showed you was, in stepping into that, we can now say we have these 2 different ways of viewing work. How can we prove which one's better? And some people say, well, I want to see research. Well, who's going to do that research? Can you actually do research of that sort? That would be highly costly to do anything more than simple exercises. And to get really meaningful research, say, we're going to do this whole project. One way we're going to manage it this way, the other way we're going to manage it that way. I don't know if anybody's really doing real research like that. But let's look at this. That leads to the question, well, how can we compare the 2? I do this as an exercise. We don't have time to do that today. What are the things that destroy effectiveness for us? And really, I like to phrase it this way. Currently, in your current work, what are the things that are making it hard for you to be effective? And I'm going to just share with you the results. I did this as an exercise at Vistaprint, somewhere about 2014. I've done this exercise 1,000 times. This was the results at Instaprint. I compiled it into a list of over 50 items. You could probably identify with all of these. The big one to me that always comes up the most is meetings destroy effectiveness. Another big grouping is context switching, workflow interruptions, distractions, multitasking. Those are, I can use this other pointer. Those are all things that get in the way of us being effective. But look at some of these other things: technical debt, external dependencies, unclear requirements, unrealistic expectations, waiting on other teams, negativity, analysis paralysis, waiting for clarification, that's being in a queue, lack of motivation. Why do we have lack of motivation? But we see that everywhere. A monolithic architecture, that's sort of technical debt. Poor working conditions. I love these 2. Too much noise, too quiet. 2 very different points of view. Let's go on here. So this is the weird thing. I've worked at many places that had all of those problems. We had those problems at Hunter, where we originated this way of working. Before we started working this way, we had those problems. As soon as we started working this way, we noticed a whole lot of them simply faded away. When they faded away, then we started really perking up and started using it this way, or say using mob program. We didn't yet know all these problems had disappeared. We just noticed things were flowing better. We didn't set out to solve any of these problems. All we were doing was turning up the good on collaboration. And it landed on the idea of writing our code as a whole team. Well, here's the thing. When we start working as a team, certain problems disappeared immediately, but others became more apparent about what was critical about them, and we can more clearly see them. A lot of people say that about Agile. Agile doesn't solve all your problems, but it makes it clear you've got some problems. Well, this is what we noticed. One of many communication problems is one that I've coined as the question queue time. And I started talking about this a long time ago. 20 years ago, I researched at a company and we found this was a huge waste for us. The question queue time is the amount of time you have to wait to get an answer to a question that is blocking you. At most companies, we see a ton of this, and the waiting is a waste. Sorry, I'm going to go through this pretty fast. You may miss a lot of pictures you might want to take. The waiting is waste. This is sort of what happens. We can use a value stream map to measure that waste. The line across the top represents we're doing work. The line across the bottom represents we're waiting to get an answer to a question that's blocking us, or other kinds of waiting. Here's what ends up happening. When we see this, we want to deal with it. And I'm going to give you an example of, for every hour we work, we get one question. Now, how long it takes to get the answer is what I want to show you, how that impacts us. So if we are not waiting to get the answers, and that's what happened when we started mob programming, then we get zero wait time and our days become a lot more productive. What if it takes 2 minutes? What if it takes 10 minutes? We're wasting an hour a day. More typically, what if it takes an hour or two or a day or two? I've done a poll on this at many companies I've visited. I've done this exercise at least 1,000 times. And generally, people will say it takes an hour or two to a day or two. That's the range they want to get. And I've worked at places where you have to wait till next week's meeting to get your answer. So you're waiting 5 days sometimes to get an answer. This is highly wasteful. How do we normally deal with it? We're blocked. Somebody tell me, what do you do? What does your team do? What does your boss have you do? When you're working on something you can't work on anymore, you're waiting to get an answer, the answer is not coming. What do you usually do? Somebody say out loud.
Work on something else.
Work on something else. We've just introduced, sorry about this, one of these problems. Multitasking. Okay, let's go back. And actually that's related to a whole bunch of problems. We actually do that. We just bring on something else. We increase inventory to stay busy. Busy is not good. Remember, I'm after effectiveness. Increasing inventory is not good. The inventory is waste itself. Inventory is anything you've worked on that the user isn't yet using. If you've got a project that won't get delivered for 3 months, everything you've done is waste until the minute your user starts using it. We don't see it that way, but that's what it is. That's a lean concept. In lean manufacturing, we'll cover that in a little bit. Wow, if this is true, we're trying to solve a problem by introducing a problem. I think most people will realize that doesn't make any sense. And it looks like this. The reason I do it this way is to show you that now we're green all the time. We're always productive, but we're really always efficient, but we're not being effective. We are hiding that we have a problem. The symptom is we're not busy. So let's keep everybody busy. The problem is we're not getting answers in a timely manner, but now we don't worry about getting answers in a timely manner because we're being busy. This doesn't solve anything. If I could only do one thing in the rest of my life to help companies is have them see that this queuing is their biggest problem in manufacturing. Well, it's clearly in manufacturing, but in product development. This is really critical. How do we deal with this? So how did we solve for it? That's a trick question. We didn't, at least not initially. It just disappeared as long as the question was for someone else that was in our team. So we were working as a team, but the product owners, the testers, the infrastructure people who did the deployments, and the database team, those folks were not on our team. And we noticed those were the big blocks. Those were huge blocks. Those were slowing us down. And our product owners are the first ones we worked on to get them involved, to be more of a team member. And some of them, like this particular fellow, Bruce, he would spend a great deal of time with us because he wanted his software to be done. And the only way to get that done is to answer those questions immediately when we have them. And we can't say, well, first we'll gather all the questions and then we'll come to you, because these are blocking questions. Usually we want you there to answer the question the minute it happens. And he agreed to respond to us with any question we had within 2 minutes. He started doing that. He was the model for the rest of the company. The people that caught on to this, they got their work done really quickly. However, this exposed to us the key word for this workshop or this talk, flow. We realized what we were attempting to have is a one-piece flow, and we would get it automatically when we were working with the first-class members of the team, the people who were actually sitting with us on the team. And we weren't getting it automatically when it was these other people on other teams. We started realizing we need to bring all that knowledge, all that capability, all that decision-making capability onto the same team. And eventually we did. But this is what flow is about, why I want to talk about flow. Now I'm going to take, I think, another 15 minutes. Do you think that's okay? I think that's what it's going to take to cover this. Is that going to work? Okay. So here's the thing. That was clearly what this was about. But as we started studying flow, and we already kind of knew this, there's at least two kinds of ways we use the word flow. And one is the psychological flow. The other is lean flow. In psychological flow, which was studied, and the term was coined by this fellow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I just did a workshop yesterday in Serbia, which was at one time part of the same country this guy came from in different ways throughout history. He passed away in October, I'm sorry to say, but he describes flow this way: a highly effective mental state of a person completely immersed in an activity. We have all experienced this. You experience it playing video games, you experience it writing, playing music, thinking of all kinds of different kinds of things, all sorts of work we do in flow. And his claim was that it's not just about creative work. You can have flow in almost any kind of work, including being a floor sweeper or whatever. And I've done plenty of that myself. They also call this being in the zone. When we're in the zone, our ideas are flowing. We're coming to solutions quickly. We're trying them quickly. The sense of time disappears. We forget about ourselves. We feel the part of something bigger. I like all of that. And then we realize, uh-oh, with the kind of flow we're achieving, are we destroying the psychological flow? And we discussed this quite a bit, and we felt that we were not destroying this flow, because each person on the team, it was voluntary. You could stay with the team as long as you want. You could go work alone as long as you want. You were in control of your own thinking patterns. So we felt we weren't destroying this flow, that we were still able to achieve it to some degree. However, that led to a slightly better question. Rather than, are we destroying it? Are we getting some other kind of flow here that's related, a kind of a team psychological flow? And we couldn't find any research on this, but we started researching it, and we at first started collecting stories and photographs of people that looked like they were all working on the same thing at the same time, so we could discuss it. What's common about this? What's different about this? And here's some examples. Here's some people solving a bookkeeping problem in the days before computers, maybe. That looks like a high-powered adding machine. I don't know. Pretty cool. Here's some high school kids learning to play guitar in their garage, right? So they're in flow doing this. Of course, I'm joking about that. This is Xerox PARC. They had these sessions where they spent a lot of time together, thinking together, sharing ideas, destroying each other's ideas, building on each other's ideas. That's a space for flow. This is my favorite one. Everybody here has a different skill. There are 3 surgeons, each doing a different part of this famous operation it's a heart operation on a 12-year-old kid in 1944, I believe. Interesting stuff here. But look at what's here. All the needed skills are there. They're not all doing something every minute. It looks to me like there's 5 people actually interacting right now, and there's others waiting to feed stuff to those people or to do their job when it comes time to do theirs. Imagine if we rolled into this operating room, that manager who said, I don't want 5 people, we're doing the work of one. And he looks around and goes, why do we have 5 people doing this surgery? I'm only going to pay for 1 person. Would that make any kind of sense? I don't think so. So this is what it's about. But then we started finding the research. This research was actually done a little before we started looking for it. We just didn't find it. But this fellow did a pretty good paper, and it's now a book. If we have collective ambition, a common goal, aligned personal goals, and we can have all the skills we need, high skill integration, then we can be very effective. We need to have open communication, the ability for each of us to share our ideas safely. If we get this, then we're going to get some pretty good results. We build a team over time doing this. We have this mutual commitment, a sense of unity, a sense of joint progress. Are these things good? Or are these things bad? I think they're all good. So if we think maybe they're good, we can experiment and see if they are. We eventually build a mutual trust. My argument about trust isn't something that I need from you. It's something I need to give to you. I need to trust you. When I'm working on a team, that's my job, is to trust my teammates. The ability to have that trust depends on us being trustworthy. We need to have a holistic focus. If we get all this stuff, we can get this team flow, and we were achieving that. So we want to talk about the other flow, and the other flow is lean flow, as in manufacturing. So I'll use this simple definition. If we take a piece from beginning to end as directly as possible, without the queuing, without the inventory, in manufacturing, we've achieved the ideal of lean flow. But we don't get that ideal. We get something close. We want to move as close to that as possible. These are just some of the wastes, but the big wastes are waiting and inventory. Others are overproduction or overwork, transportation, so on and so on. There's 7 or 8 main wastes. Can you get this flow in product development or in software development? And I believe we can. And I think that's the main thing we were getting. Now, in our research, we came upon this book from Donald Reinertsen. I advise that you get a copy of this book. Tell your friends that you've read it, and they will admire you even more than they admire you now. You don't even need to read it. Just tell them you've read it. So I would say definitely read this book. At least somebody on your team should read this book. Reinertsen says this about the principle of queuing waste, and you can see how closely related this is to the question queue time, which I think was our big waste. Queues are the root cause of the majority of economic waste in product development. Let's pretend for a second that is true. If it's the majority of waste, what are we going to do about that? We better deal with it. And I think it is true. So not to belabor this too much, but Reinertsen talks quite a bit about queuing. That book has about 8 chapters, each covering a different area, and one of them is queuing. I think the top here is the big one. It extends the cycle time. The queuing is not providing value. Anything that doesn't provide value, but it's using up time, is going to extend the cycle time. We want to have a compressed cycle time as little most directly as possible. So all these other problems and many others happen because we don't understand how important that is. I can now define what flow means with software development. Each story flows from idea to working, delivered, in-use code. People are using it as directly as possible without the queuing, without the inventory. And another big area that's really about destroying our effectiveness, without the distractions, interruptions, context switching, and multitasking. These are the big ones to me. And if we solve for this, wow, we get superpowers. So let's just look a little bit further at what this means. If we can take an idea, turn it into a story, create it, deploy it, and get feedback in 2 hours, that is really powerful. If we have to wait 2 days, if we have to wait a week, a month, how many teams do you work with that are deploying stuff every few hours? That's where we want to be. This is what Agile is about. And you notice I put this in a circle. It's really a linear thing, the way we drawn it here. But really, you can learn it from something and move back in this flow. You can it doesn't need to be linear. But if you are taking Agile training, make sure they put circles. If there's no circles in your training, it's not Agile. So that's how you can tell whether you have Agile training or not. It's got a bunch of circles in it. Okay, so what we found is that when we started doing mob programming, we were getting the right things done. We were discovering them and getting them done, and we were getting almost none of the wastes. That's what we were getting. We didn't set out to get that. We didn't set out to improve flow. We set out to improve our ability to collaborate. And I can guarantee you this, nothing I've done in my entire life is not enhanced by collaboration. Somehow or another, all the work we do is enhanced by collaboration. So with mob programming, what do we optimize for? We're going to optimize for the flow of the work rather than for the output of the individual. We're not trying to get the most out of people. We're trying to get the best out of people. It's a very different mindset. And nowhere I've worked in my entire life, either as a manager or as a employee who's doing the work, have I seen this not to be true. If you set things up for people to succeed, you get the best. If you set things up for people to make it difficult for them work, that famous quote from Peter Drucker, which says, most of what we consider management is simply making it hard for people to work. If that's how we do it, and that's how most management's done, we're really in trouble. So I now can answer that original question. That original question slightly rephrased, how can we be effective with 5 people at one computer? And they would actually say, how can you be effective? So how can we be effective with 5 people at one computer? It's because we're getting these flows. It wasn't just one flow or another flow. There were actually 3. At first, I thought it was flow versus flow, but it's flow plus flow. We get the psychological flow of the individuals. We still are in charge of our own brain and how we're willing to think. We get the flow of the team, the psychological flow in the team. We're actually getting that collaboration, which gives us, the ability with, as long as we have the safety and all the skills we need, it gives us the ability to move quickly to the better solution. There's our timer telling me I should be done. I'm not far from it. I think there's 2 more slides. And we were getting the lean flow. So we're getting 3 kinds of flows. And somebody in a workshop once, a developer shouted out, that's flow plus plus. And I thought, oh, that's a perfect programmer joke. So I stole it and put it into my talk. We're getting all these flows. It's flow plus plus. We're incrementing on each one of these kinds of flows. I've never achieved the psychological flow that I get with a team until we started realizing how important this was. The individual psychological flow I'd experienced for years. The first 15 years of my programming life, I always worked alone. I didn't even know pair programming existed. So and I love it. I still love to program alone, but I don't do any production work alone. I'll do exercises or explorations on my own. But even in that, it's sometimes a lot better doing it with a pair at least. And then the lean flow, which I think is often neglected in product development. Yikes. So we're expanding on the lean flow to a much better degree than we could have if we weren't working as a team. We can still get flow in product development by communicating more openly, in a more effective manner than meetings and documents. As you see in the Agile world, we do things like, they used to call it big radiators, information radiators, making all the information available all the time. To close this off, I use this little saying. I learned this when I was in my 20s, and it served me well. The object isn't to create art or to make art. It's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. If you set up things to work effectively where everyone can be their best, whatever they do is going to be the best you can get. If we don't figure that out, we really weaken our ability to be effective. And I got to shamefully state, many years ago, I owned my own businesses for about 20 years, and I turned into the boss that I would never want to work for. I had to reinvent myself once I started realizing that was a problem. Fortunately, that was revealed to me through some things that happened. And take it to heart. And I think this is way useful. This is a good thing. So that's it. I think we still have a few minutes. Am I right? We still have a few minutes to answer a question or two.
No,
And I always like to say this in different languages. If you happen to be in Sweden, tack så mycket. If you're in Germany, danke schön. Muito obrigado if you happen to be in Portugal. So
there
thanks
we
so
go.
much.
Perfect. So yeah, we have some good questions in the chat. I'm going to try to run through most of these within the next 10 minutes.
Let's give it a try.
Let's give it a try. And I'm actually going to combine two that I see that could possibly be combined here. So one of them that flows into the other here, when you're looking at, I guess, mob makeup, what is the ideal size for mob programming? And then when you look at a large and complex project with multi-teams, how to set up the teams.
So the first thing is, so if I gave my introductory talk to mob programming, I think I would have answered this. The first thing is team size. There's no ideal team size, right? So The ideal size for the team is going to be specific to the nature of the company they work for, the nature of the work they're doing, the kinds of knowledge that's required. If all the knowledge and skills necessary are in my brain, I can probably do the work alone. It's rare in a company that happens, right? You often will have a product owner, or you're going to have somebody who's in control of doing the database work. You don't do it yourself. So now we're expanding out what belongs on the team. So I use this heuristic. It goes in both directions. The first one is, if we find we are coming up with blocking questions, that means we are missing knowledge on this team. And we either have to get the knowledge on the team, which means we have to study this stuff and become an expert ourselves, or find the expert to bring onto the team. Okay, the other part of that is, if I'm on a team and I'm not contributing much, that the knowledge is already there, then, and I'm not learning, because learning is an equivalent contribution to, adding ideas. The learning is just as important. But if I'm not learning, if I'm not getting anything out of it, you're not getting anything out of it, it's like open space. Move to a space where you will be effective. So that's about the size. I've worked with the teams that were as small as really literally 2, which is a pair, but same concepts, up to 14. I worked on a project where we had a very important thing that needed to be done as quickly as possible because of a huge thing that was failing within this company. It needed to be dealt with right now. And we started with the core people, and we simply added people each time we had a blocking question. And we got permission from the CEO in this company of about 5,000 people that whenever we had a question, a manager would have to provide somebody who could answer it and then release that person to this team until this team was done. So we had all the knowledge in one room. So how many do you need? Ron Jeffries once asked me, what's the right number? What's the maximum number? I said, I don't know. And so he, I think, jokingly said, well, what if we filled the Michigan State football stadium? Would that be too many? I said, I don't know. Let's try it. So yeah, I don't know what's too many people. It's going to depend on the problem we're trying to solve. I have a feeling if you put 50,000 programmers into one stadium, they'd figure it out. We don't need to guide them or tell them. The team will figure it out. If you don't trust your teams that much, start extending that trust to your teams. They will figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the other side of that question?
So you led into it a little bit. When you're starting to deal with larger and more complex projects with multi-teams, multi-sites, like how to handle that.
The same way you do it now. How do you do it with, you got everybody's working in separate cubicles? Whatever you do now will apply to a team. It just becomes easier because you're not managing as much stuff. If right now what you're doing is having big, what do they call them? Like one room things where everybody gets together and makes decisions. I won't mention any. I would like to say it's probably safe for me to not mention any particular methodology. That feels safer for me. Okay, so yeah, if we put off working as a group to some big event, we're really missing the boat. So how are we going to manage that? We need to figure out how to have more frequent communications and how to decouple stuff. That would be not just a workshop. That might be, a super workshop to have to go through to figure out how to do that in any organization. My warning is, if we feel this is harder to manage than when we are working with individuals, we're really doing something we need to scrutinize. We need to figure out how does it get harder when we have these teams? So if your project is too big, you probably want to figure out how much can we cut this project. I think most projects, like Alan Kelly says, if you have ever had Alan Kelly do a presentation for your group, you should get him. He works out of London. He was like the beyond projects thinking. He would say every 200-person project has a 20-person project inside dying to get out. And that's sort of the thing. It's like we make projects way too large, too many people. That itself introduces too many problems.
And I think you inadvertently sort of answered this next question, which at a high level, I guess it sort of underlays a root problem. What if the developers are themselves convinced that working separately is more of an effective way?
Then you just let them work the way they want to work. But we just need to understand, when we work solo, we are now introducing a high cost of communication. We're introducing a high cost of coordination. These are huge costs, and this is why, so we are automatically saying we are accepting the question queue time. Because the individual who's going to work alone, if they can completely work alone without having to refer to anyone else, without having to ever send an email or a Slack message or something to anyone else, they can truly work on that thing alone. Does that ever actually happen? Why do we have these? They used to have this Scrum meeting they used to call a daily stand-up. Do any of you remember that idea? That was there. And what was one of the big questions they would ask? Are you blocked on anything? Well, if we're waiting till tomorrow morning or this afternoon to ask, are you blocked on anything? We've already naturally just accepted it. We have this miserably long queue. We shouldn't go 5 minutes waiting for something that's blocking us. It doesn't become apparent until we start working on things as a team, how huge the blocks are. Because if the whole team is blocked on one thing, we want to get to the answer quickly. But if 5 people are blocked on a similar thing, think of all the overhead we had. Each one of them has to talk to the product owner. Oh, I got a problem. Oh, I got a problem. The product owner is going, yeah, these are all kind of similar problems. Why don't we just have a meeting to talk about these once a week? We've introduced queues, and we introduce queues, and we just keep going. I think I got off topic. So
no, I mean, that's good. And I mean, speaking of product owner, when you think about that product owner and part of the mob, how do you keep the PO's focus outward on customer and strategy, and also participate in the mob effectively?
Because we're doing things so quickly, we are learning what it is we really need to be doing. This is about rapid feedback. And so if we're in an organization and the belief in the organization is that the product owner is the go-between between the customer and the team, I could ask you this in a more of a workshop way. What smell, what anti-pattern are we observing here? Did you ever see Office Space, the movie Office Space? What is the problem we're introducing when we say that person's job is to interact with the customer? That person's job is to get the requirements and bring them to the team. Mary Poppentick, hopefully you've had her do some talks for you. Mary Poppentick would say, the team is the product owner. Yeah. Why do we have this role? I'm not going to change your organization. I know that, but we better think about these things. Why did we introduce this thing? Why do we have it? This is again, introducing queuing. It's introducing, are you familiar with Wheel's law? Wheel's law says, his fundamental law says, communication most commonly fails except by accident. If that's true, boy, we better deal with that. And that's what's happened. We've introduced the telephone game. Why do we do this? And it's like a fundamental part of most, most methodologies is that we're dividing the wrong thing when we do that.
So I do want we're running up on time here, but I want to get one in that I think is always helpful from my insight. So let's say that there's, a team on here today's call, and it's a highly functional team, but they really want to try mob programming out. And so obviously, I think within most organizations, that's not going to be up to them if they can switch it around. So what do you recommend on sort of getting that buy-in from decision makers for teams to say, hey, I want to try this out?
So there's lots of ways to do this, but if you're in an organization where you have to make a case to try something, the old saying, you either change your organization or you change your organization, right? So that's kind of what I've had to do at different times. If the organization doesn't make it easy for you to experiment with things, you might want to think about finding a job at an organization which makes it easy to experiment with things. But I've done literally, certainly over 500 mob programming workshops. For a company to say, please come in and show our people how to do this, that's indicating a company that's ready to try these things. So looking, if your company just isn't going to do it, then I would say, get Linda Rising to come in and do a talk to your group about influencing change. She calls it fearless change, changing when you don't have the authority to make the changes. And 20 years leading up to the job I had at at Hunter, where we devised this mob programming, was me learning how to influence when I wasn't the boss, when I didn't own the company. And one of the big things you can do is look for others in your company that are ready to try these things and find a way to try it in as gentle way as possible. So the way I did it at one company long before mob programming existed was I got my boss to fund me for a lunchtime learning session where we would provide lunch, because they wouldn't allow us to do this during our work. And so I just said, okay, anybody who will come to a thing where you're not getting paid and take up your lunchtime, that's somebody I probably want to work with, because they're willing to learn on their own time. And so that was one way that I did it. And it actually turned out where I got a core of people that I even still work with sometimes just from that one company 20 years ago or so. Is the idea that make the opportunities, give it a try, fly under the radar, become the boss. There's another good one. Why don't you just become the boss and allow it to happen? Yeah. So, Max Planck, we'll end with that. It's a very encouraging kind of a motto. Max Planck says, science doesn't change by convincing old scientists of new ideas. It changes when those scientists die. Science changes one dead scientist at a time. I think in this case, it changes one retired manager at a time. Be ready to take the leadership. You don't need to be a manager to take that leadership. And certainly don't wish anybody to die as much as you would want to.
Woody, I
And we'll end on that
can talk to you all day.
note.
I can talk to you all day long, but unfortunately we're wrapped up here. This will be available afterwards. You can find Woody, looks like across the web at Woody Zuill.
I'll share this too. I did write a little book on this. It just took basically what this talk is and tried to put it into written word. I'm a terrible writer, but yeah, you can get this electronically at LeanPub if you use LeanPub.
Awesome. And Anna, you wanna take us out for today?
I will love to, Jay. Thank you. Woody, it has been an honor. Thank you so much. And thank you for to your wife. I got so many great pictures with illustrations. And Orlando has one quick question. And, if you guys want to stay over, that's great.
Okay,
Next
I can stay. I don't have anything planned. So if there are more questions and you want to, end the recording, that would be fine. I'm willing to stay a bit. So go ahead.
And real quick, thank you all. And Diana Larson, she might have wrote a book that's well known. Agile Retrospectives is going to be our next presenter, and it'll be on talking to leadership to get their buy-in, because we know they're typically safe and we want them to be a little bit more agile. So that's going to be a great talk. Thank you all. And thank you, Woody. And now we'll proceed with the additional questions.
Yeah, I'm willing to hang out. At some point I got to go, but my next engagement is a few hours away. So we're pretty good with that. Yeah, there it is. Muito obrigado. Tack so mycket. All right.
A quick question for you.
Shut the screen share down. Yes.
Yeah, a quick question for you. Did you say everybody knows what the customers want? But suppose you get customers with conflicting points of view. Okay.
It's not that everybody knows what the customers want. It's that the role of the product owner might be better done as that knowledge being on the team. So if we take, Mary Poppendick often talks about this, that most of the best ideas to get into software development, or at least 50%, those come from the developers, the people who are actually in the trenches writing the stuff. We are very sophisticated users of software development. But all we're saying is we've divided the customers so that they're outside of the team. And extreme programming kind of was suggesting that they really the users need to be part of this, that we separated, that makes this gap where we play the telephone game and all the other problems.
But the users have conflicting ideas.
Then maybe they need both. I mean, who's going to tell them what they should have? We can try both, see which one works. If you're talking about customers, there's many ways to think about customers. So first of all, a customer, if we have a web application, let's say it's a bookkeeping or scheduling or whatever, our customers are in the millions, and we're not going to be working directly with all the customers. There are other ways to get to that analytics from them. But does that mean in that situation, should we have one person whose job is to figure those things out, what we should do next? Or should that be part of what the team does? The other thing is, if our customer is an internal one, maybe we're writing software that's going to be used on this assembly line to manage the line scheduling. So, and there's several people there, they have conflicting ideas. We want to discover which one's best, not decide which one's best. This is the problem with most software development. We think up front, we can decide what's best, and we cannot. Anybody
Okay.
who believes that is believing something that I don't think can be proven. We can discover what's best or what's better than what we already think. That's what I want to do. So yeah, there's always going to be conflicting ideas. If it really means we can't have both of the ideas in the same project, we might still want to explore, well, why can't we? And what is it? How will that other idea work? Well, we want choices. And if we're good at giving the choices, customers will like that. We don't want to overwhelm them. Yeah. So it would really depend. That's contextual, right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just
You first, Orlando. Go ahead.
okay. So I was
No.
just complimenting on the question that I think America did when we were talking about this. How could this work with big teams? And we are working with 100 and something teams, and we have a problem in our own team that I think we should try this. But I think the other problem that maybe you didn't say is that in this group of 100 people, we have a not very good setup because and that's I was asking if this team topology approach that we talk about this, because sometimes we notice that some of the features every team is doing, and we have a lot of cognitive load. And I think if you also ever apply these team topologies in your line of work, if you are
Yeah, so
familiar, if you just
yeah, that team topologies idea, and there's a book on the topic. It's very relevant, very relevant. I have read about 20 books on teamwork, maybe 25 or 30 in my research and trying to understand so I can more logically talk about this stuff. Yeah, so yeah, I think there's a lot going on here. This is not a simple or straightforward thing. I'd really like to make that clear. Yeah.
Mark?
Yes, thank you so much. One of the things I've been curious about from the start of mobbing is this principle of an idea going through someone else's hands to get into the computer.
Right, right.
I was a communications major in college and got pretty theoretical into communication, but I think that's single-handedly the most interesting part of all of this. And I'm wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what's happening in the teams that you've worked with in terms of how communication is changing between each other because of that principle.
That's certainly a fundamental difference. So when I worked alone for 15 years, I didn't need to convince anybody else of anything that I was doing. You know, this has to do with Wheel's law quite a bit. If the least communicative way to maybe pair program is to have the person with the idea doing the coding and the other person just trying to follow along. So I was originally guided in pair programming that we use this driver navigator concept where one person's at the keyboard and the other one is the one with the idea. So if we get to a point where the person with the idea, like, you know, we're going to extract out this method from this class, we start extracting it out, and then the person who's in, you know, kind of guiding says, I don't really know how to deal with this dependency we have. And if the person at the keyboard says, oh, I know how to do it, they would leave the keyboard. And the person who was guiding becomes the driver. So this concept of pair programming was how I was originally taught how to do pair programming, but rarely saw it done that way. And I became very dedicated to it in 2009 when I worked for a very short time on some open source code with Llewellyn Falco. Llewellyn had been using that idea. I think he originated it the way that he describes it. I'm not insisting that's how you work. I'm just sharing that's how I work. So what I see the difference in the team is we now have to start learning to share how to share our ideas well. And a whiteboard is really the most powerful tool for this. You can also put comments in the code. For example, we're navigating the next little bit. So, you know, in English or in a spoken language, I would say, well, first we want to get a drop down. We want to fill the drop down with regions. Then we want to display the options that will be available for this particular region. Well, that's a high level navigation. but now we're communicating it in a very direct sense instead of me trying to write a document to show that. So we have to get the skills of communicating directly using the whiteboard and seeing the code get written. I mentioned Wheel's laws, and the point is that we can circumvent, is that the right word, Wheel's laws, by actually trying the things we're trying to communicate. So if I would say turn left and the person driving turns right, I know the miscommunication happened until they, yeah, I could ask you, do you understand? And you could say yes or no, but I have no way to confirm whether you understand or not. So it's in the doing of the work that we discover the work we must do. It's in the doing of work that we discover the understanding that we have. Have you ever seen anybody using this thing where they take these cards that have 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, whatever, and they do this voting thing that they call story point planning poker? A completely useless thing, but some people use it. In so doing, I've asked Scrum Master types and manage, why do you do this? They go, well, if everybody like comes with about the same number, we know we have the same understanding. And if they're different numbers, we know we have to discuss it and figure it out. Okay, well, wait a second. When they're all the same number, how does that prove they have the same understanding? Maybe you need to add up all the numbers. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is, well, 3, not all just a 3, because they all have a different understanding of some little different part that they think is simple. And it's really not. So we don't really prove our understanding until we get into doing the work. And then we go, oh, I was wrong about this. You know, all these things we do ahead of time to try to prove understanding doesn't work. So the guideline that I use is if I say to you, we need a drop down, and you start doing a list box, I will know that immediately. So the whole team is coming along with us. So everybody's watching, they're learning as we go, and we're getting that fuller it's a more complete understanding. But again, I don't insist that's the way to work. That's probably the only way I work now. I don't think I've worked on a team where I've had to do differently. But again, I don't insist on a rotation. I don't insist on anything. With mob programming, that's up for the team to decide, right? But boy, I think I could make a pretty strong case for using that guideline for Llewellyn. That's why I share it. Trying to go from your head into the computer, has to go through someone else's hands, forces us to learn to communicate. I didn't really answer your question. What have I seen with teams? They have to learn to do this.
You elaborated, and that's what I was hoping for. Thank you so much.
So it's a dysfunction if somebody's just sitting there typing all day. I see this at teams, and everybody becomes disengaged. They stop trying to contribute. A kind of groupthink starts happening. Lots of anti-patterns.
I love your
Again,
point. I love
I'm not an
your
expert.
point on scoring there. So
Yeah.
somebody gives it a 2, another person gives it a 3. Okay, we'll make your case of why it should be a 2 or 3. Can you come up? Can you come down? But then if we both score 3, then I mean, it's like, oh, okay, we skip right past it. So
Yeah,
why,
I think
why
that's
did we both score a 3? And then
Yeah.
do we really have a true understanding of what that 3 means to both of us? So yeah, there's some gaps in that I've never thought about it like that, honestly.
Well, a lot of people will say to me, you know, because I talk about estimates all the time. Matter of fact, in a week from now, I think I'm doing a meetup tonight or tomorrow on this as a preliminary to the one I'm giving next week for the Montreal Agile Manager Group on no estimates. I'm kind of rewriting my estimate talk. And I observed a group once. The product owner and a Scrum Master are presenting the work to the team in a Scrum style planning meeting. Some of you might know or use Scrum. I'll pray for you tonight. But anyways, here's the thing. I was just kidding. I'm not going to bother praying for you. But anyways, I was observing this team. I often have been asked to come in and observe teams. Even though I'm working at a company just doing programming, I've got a reputation, you know, in the years past. And so I go and confer with teams about how can we improve our practices. So I'm watching them work. The Scrum Master, I'll just take a Post-it note to show. Here we go. This is a good one. Here's a Post-it note. We go, here's the next story. Product owner, tell us a little bit about it. The product owner explains a little bit. And then the Scrum Master turns around to put it on the board. And while he's putting it on the board, just like a magician, the product owner is looking at the board. And then the Scrum Master is going to turn around and ask for our planning poker. But while he's putting that on the board, let's see, to make this a better example, I'm going to write a number on a card. One of the people on the team, which turns out is the team lead, as the Scrum Master and the product owner turn around, he holds up a card and does this. And then they vote. So the Scrum Master turned back around, let's vote. They're all 3s. The next one, they're all 5s. The next one, they're all 2s. The Scrum Master says, boy, you're really in alignment today. Well, this is a style of group think. So I cornered the team lead later. He's somebody I actually knew. He's one of the most brilliant programmers I've had the pleasure to work with. And I said, I saw what you were doing and I kind of can guess at why. Can you tell me why? He said, if we have a different number, the Scrum Master makes us talk about it. And none of us want to talk about it. Well, this was not providing an environment where great things can happen, where people can excel.
You know, Woody, that's why Chet always says one of his worst mistakes were story points.
Yeah, and I blame him for that completely.
He's like,
No.
story points. Bad idea.
Well, see, the problem is, are you all familiar with this idea of crossing the chasm and the diffusion of innovation? The book Diffusion of Innovation was written back in the 60s about hybridized corn seed, I think. And it was basically about how the innovators come up with ideas. The early adopters are always watching for new ideas. They want those advantages. But then you have this early majority, which is the people who will eventually be using the hybridized corn. And then you have the late majority and maybe the laggards. So the innovators, they're just researching, they're trying things that are good, that they hope would be good. The early adopters, they're the people who are excited to try the new things. And as they start writing about it and explaining that it's working for them, the early adopters, the ones that are closest to the early majority, the ones that are closest to the early adopters, they're watching and they're seeing those articles coming up and they're willing to try 10% of their field. They're going to use the hybridized corn. They're going to do the experiments too, but they have to have some proof it's already working for someone else. So this is sort of the issue with things like story points, is that the innovators try things. The early adopters, they look at them and go, hey, let's do the Spotify model. Let's do a Scrum. Let's do what? So they're singing, they want to try it. And when enough of them are writing, hey, this worked for us, the early majority, they bought into it. They don't have the mindset of the early adopters or the innovators. It has to be gotten dumbed down or modified in some way to get into those early majority. And by then it's too late with things like, it's not too late for hybridized corn. The whole point is eventually, if this is better, everybody's going to use it, but you lose some of the advantages you used to have. Like you could grow your own seed corn in the old days. And now you don't, you buy it from a seed company. But you also get the advantages like, hey, we no longer deal with this poison or this, we don't need to spray this poison because this is resistant to this disease or these insects, or it gives us bigger ears or whatever it is. You get the advantages. But with things like innovation, you can't move innovation into the early majority. They have to become innovators. That means they have to cross in they have to move in the other direction. And that rarely happens. I should put together a whole talk on that.
Woody, we're going to have you back for sure. I've enjoyed this. I do have to run to another meeting, so I'm going to have to end.
I do too. I have a 1:32. Honestly,
you should never plan these meetings. What are you doing?
Normally we have questions and we have like maybe 1 or 2 questions. We've never had it like this.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's because I take so long answering questions.
No, you are a delight.
Because if you ask one question, I'll give you 3 answers. So anyways, thank you so much.
Thank you all so
I had a
much.
great time and we can get together another time. Sure.
Absolutely.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Woody.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.